The famous Lipitor story, guaranteed entertainment here about the most commonly prescribed drug in the United States, Lipitor. This is a cholesterol-lowering drug proven to lower low-density lipoprotein or bad cholesterol and proven in randomized controlled trials to reduce the risk of certain adverse cardiovascular events such as heart attacks. Also, it has the advantage over certain older statin cholesterol-lowering drugs in that it's stronger, better at lowering bad cholesterol. This doesn't necessarily correlate with being more effective in preventing heart attacks and strokes, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, there are over 100 million prescriptions of this medication in the United States alone, so many Americans have taken it at some point. And Pfizer, the drug company who originally developed Lipitor, made tens of billions of dollars per year on Lipitor, that is, before it became generic in 2011, and since then their revenues have significantly declined as many generic manufacturers came into the market, driving the price down. And this story takes place in 2011 when Lipitor became generic. Now I want you to pause the video and tell me, have you taken Lipitor? Was it effective for you, and did you experience any side effects? And also, have you taken generic atorvastatin, and was it effective for you, and have you experienced any side effects? And kind of compare the two if you've taken both of them. So anyways, I work with Southern California Kaiser Permanente Medical Group. And when Lipitor went generic, we saw the opportunity to save money by moving people to the generic form of the medication. They created a contract with generic manufacturers, and their plan was basically to switch everyone from Lipitor to generic atorvastatin. Why not use that money to recruit new doctors, nurses, physical therapists, whatever, or build new hospitals, or buy new fancy drugs for which there is no new generic equivalent. And so they went ahead and did this, and they switched many, many patients to generic atorvastatin. But here's the thing. Generic medications aren't always the same as branded originals. There can be slight differences. For instance, although Lipitor is a simple small molecule and any qualified pharmaceutical manufacturer could probably make it, there are differences in inactive ingredients, and that could affect the bioavailability, in other words, the absorption into the blood, so you could get slightly different blood concentrations. Also, the compression of the powder into the pill is slightly different from different manufacturers. Also, sometimes you can get fraudulent drugs that don't even contain the active ingredient. So there's no 100% guarantee that any particular generically manufactured drug is going to be identical to the branded original. And sure enough, this became a problem, as the Kaiser pharmacies started getting complaints from patients who were changed from brand name Lipitor to generic atorvastatin. People were complaining about muscle aches, gastrointestinal upset. They had their cholesterol checked, and it wasn't as low as before. The medication wasn't working as well. People even had liver tests, and there were elevations of the liver enzymes, which can potentially be a serious problem. And they were getting hundreds, thousands of these complaints. They were absolutely overwhelmed. Changing to generic atorvastatin was an absolute disaster. But here's the kicker. Kaiser Permanente had stockpiles of brand name Lipitor, and they wanted to use it up, of course, no reason to waste it. And so what they did is they were dispensing bottles labeled atorvastatin, and instead of filling that with generic atorvastatin, they were filling it with brand name Lipitor. That's a form of atorvastatin. So these individuals were getting the exact same pill. In fact, if you look closely at the pill, you could see that the imprint was consistent with brand name Lipitor, but most people don't really look at their pills, and they look pretty much the same, and they're the same color, and they do vary a lot from manufacturer to manufacturer anyway. And so anyways, these people were experiencing all these adverse events even though the medication had not changed at all. So what happened? Were they faking? Had they been brainwashed by the pharmaceutical companies? Were they psychosomatic? No. These are real side effects of the medication. Lipitor does cause muscle aches. It does cause gastrointestinal upset. It can elevate your liver enzymes. In terms of cholesterol values, there can be a lot of fluctuation based on diet and just random fluctuation the time of day you have it checked, for example. So these were real changes. It's just that people were falsely attributing it to the change in the medication, or what they perceived to be the change in the medication. And it's just amazing how the mind works. When you're very attuned to something, you're more likely to notice a small difference. People could have had these side effects before, but they just sort of accepted them because they had confidence in the medication, or they thought the benefits outweighed the cost. But now that they were really thinking of it, wary of these generic competitors, they were more likely to notice them. Now, it turns out Kaiser Permanente is a large organization, and they have resources that a lot of people don't have. And they actually do independent testing on these generically manufactured drugs. They even do bioavailability testing, where they give people the drug and check blood levels to make sure it's the real deal and that it's close enough to the branded equivalent. Now, don't get me wrong, there are instances where generics are not equivalent to the original branded form, but those situations are relatively uncommon, and usually there's a clear reason for it. There's no particular reason a branded drug should always be better than generic competitors. It's not like someone has a magical drug manufacturing plant just because they have a huge, well-known drug company. But anyways, I'd like to know what your experience with generic drugs is. Have you ever had an adverse event? And retrospectively, was it due to this psychological phenomenon that some people call the nocebo effect? In other words, anticipating a negative adverse event. Or was it a real biological phenomenon? And do you have any suggestions for future videos?